This week we are going to be focusing on our tubeless tyres. Hopefully we'll have something in here for everyone, and we're going to go through a basic step-by-step install and sneak in a few clever little hacks along the way. This is Tubeless Tyre Setup. Tubeless tyres have been around for a fair while now, and lots of bikes even come tubeless ready. Now this to me is slightly counterintuitive, as often tubeless ready bikes still come with tubes in. But maybe it's just the tyres that are ready to go, or sometimes they even include valves and sealant. So what we're going to do today is go right back to basics. We're going to talk about the preparation of the rim, getting the tape on there, installing the tyre, the all-important logo placement, and things you can add to your sealant to concoct a potion that's going to keep air in your tyres for longer. With those tubeless ready setups, sometimes they don't even include the tape ready to go. Now, your rim is one half of your interface, and making sure that the tape is stuck down securely is absolutely vital. So for this, we're going to need to make sure this is really clean. So taking this old tape off, everything is going to be wiped down with some alcohol. Make sure it's absolutely bone dry before we even think about bringing some tape onto the rim. If it's not dry, it's not really going to stick down. It's just going to be a waste of your time, effort and money. So for that, I'm going to use some this is called fast drying contact cleaner, which is basically isopropyl alcohol. And be really careful to take up any residue, any clumps, and not leave any tape on there whatsoever. If you've got a matte rim, often you can find your tape, even though it is clean and it is dry, the tape doesn't really want to stick. For that reason, I'd often actually just go around with a row of electrical tape in the well for the first time round. This isn't really anything to do with sealing or diameter, but rather you'll be amazed at how well the tubeless tape will stick to that. So I've put my wheel here in a touring stand. You obviously don't need to do this. You can do it in your frame, perhaps upside down or in a work stand. And I'm just going to apply electrical tape in one loop round to help it stick. Now, whilst I'm talking about tape not sticking, some of you are probably screaming at your screens, Henry, just use gaffer tape, it's way better, it's super sticky, etc, etc, etc. And it's your bike, do what you want, it does seal quite effectively. The issue with gaffer tape or gorilla tape is when you want to either replace a spoke or swap a rim, it's the mesh. It can really kind of cause problems. If you want to take all the gaffer tape off to actually put potentially a more reliable sealing tape on there, it does leave that grid in a really hard residue. So I'm just putting the tape down and making sure so it sits just in the well there. This is actually going to give our tubeless tape an enormous amount to purchase and really help it tailor fit the shape of the well, the profile of the well. This is half of the interface along with the tyre, and the better we prepare this, the more secure and reliable your tubeless setup will be. Now it's time to put our tubeless tape on. So the rim is quite important. You want to make sure that it's wide enough to cover the well. And where you start is up to you. Personally, I find my valve hole and I go a quarter of a wheel back to about there. And then I'm going to loop one full rotation and a half to end up past the valve hole. This just means that it is double covered here, which I think sometimes does help get a better seal for the valve really. There we go. Now we want to do something like a little shimmy here, just side to side to make sure it gets right down into that well. We're just going to smooth afterwards. You don't want to get any air trapped under here, and that's really important. Think about it like laminating a sheet of paper. You don't want those big patches, because if they burst, then your whole tubeless system goes out the window pretty much. So a little shimmy from side to side. Some people, to get a tighter fit to the bead of their tyre, put lots of tape on. I would say we get a nice fit with our tape, and then if in the future you wanted to go around with some electrical tape or something like that to increase that diameter, which makes it tighter to the fit of the tyre, then you have got the option to do that. When you look kind of over the horizon of your wheel, you should be able to see that profile perfectly. If you know that your rim has quite a deep well and it's gone flat, you haven't done it correctly, I'm afraid to say. And yeah, that electrical tape really does come in handy. Okay, so there we go, so that's one full rotation. So we're going to go all the way around till we get to the other side there. So we're going to do another half turn. Because this tape is really sticky. You know, like a lot of tapes, even hardware tapes or whatever, the glue will firm over time. This isn't as thick as it will get. Once it's allowed to set, it will be a really, really good seal. Cool, so my valve is just there. So after starting here, I've gone 1.5 times around. Now, before we install the tyre, I'm actually going to visually inspect this to make sure that I'm satisfied with it. There's sometimes I could put the tyre on now, but if there's something that's obviously off and without checking, I wouldn't find out until I've got the tyre on, till I've put the sealant in, till I've got it on the bead, and you basically just whittle away the best years of your life messing around with tubeless systems. So we're going to do it properly. So that means we're going to run our thumb round to make sure it's sitting in the well like so. We're going to visually inspect it, make sure there are no bits that look particularly off, be that whether it's coming across the well or something like that, or big air bubbles. But that looks absolutely bang on. Okay, so now, moment of truth, we're going to decide on the exact spot that our valve sits. Now this is really important because we don't want to be either getting it misaligned and putting the hole in the wrong place. Similarly, we don't want to be tearing up or down this tape. So we're going to get a sharp pick, one such as this. You could even use, you know, a kitchen utensil or something like that. And we're going to actually go from this side to what we want to do is want to find the center of that valve hole, which is there. Now, this is really important. We are not puncturing the tape here, because what's that going to do is it's going to lift the tape off the well of the rim and undo the hard work we went to ensure there was no air trapped underneath. So we're just going to use that as an indication. I can see where it was there. I'm going to come back round through. Job's a good one. Now you want to make sure that hole isn't so big that it's larger than the diameter of your valve. So whatever pick you choose to use, it just needs to be smaller in diameter. So when this comes in and the seal presses on there, it hasn't got any two bigger boots to fill, so to speak. So I'm going to put that to one side. Now in the past, I have sometimes dunked these in sealant before. Sometimes I would put a square of gaffer tape over there just to, you know, really get a tight tolerance fit. I think valves have got a lot better. I think sealants that we get in the mountain biking industry has got a bit better, and I don't really feel that it's needed anymore. But certainly, giving these a quick dunk, or even putting a square of tape over there, I think it can help a bit. But I'm not going to do it today because I don't think you really need to. And then, with the valve core still in, because that's going to give us a nice sort of wedge to drive that hole to a slightly bigger size, we're going to go through. So easy does it. There we go. And you can see it's going to make that hole slightly bigger as it goes through. You want to get that pressed nice and firm in. If you're using asymmetric rims such as these, they often come with a little thing for the valve nut to press against, and that's really important. I'd also say on your carbon rims, often they do come with that, and it just keeps them nicer for longer. Hopefully you won't have to be cranking this too tight, but I would say in my experience, I normally do go above finger tight, and that's really important because we want to make sure that seal there is really tight. What it's actually going to do is it's going to pull that in until that larger diameter part of the seal really is pressed up firmly against that valve hole. I'll actually use the little kind of butt of an 8mm Allen key just to gently tap it through there. I'm not applying a significant amount of force, but rather just getting enough slack to tighten that nut appropriately. Similarly, you can press just there and tighten the nut and get it to kind of an appropriate level of torque. I will often, to be honest with you, just get a set of pliers and just double check it. I'm not saying you want to be swinging off it. I'm not saying you want to be, if you're scarring that nut quite heavily, then you're going too hard basically. But certainly just making sure it's torqued, making sure that whole system is pulled together. There's actually a bit of tension going through that seal, then that sounds about bang on to me. Now we're going to talk about the highly contentious and divisive issue of where you place your tyre logo. Now, some people, and to be honest, they're probably correct, will say, Henry, it doesn't matter. But I would, fight them to the death on the assertion that it does. So when we used to do bike checks, when you're working at races on say team bikes, the way we'd always take the photos would be the valve would be at 6 o'clock, which means you want the branding, the manufacturer's branding, at 12 o'clock. Some people think you should have like say the Maxis or Continental written by the valve, but to me it never quite looks right. So what I would do is have the branding here, and you want to go opposite to the valve and then count out your spokes. So say Continental, line up with that spoke and that spoke on the outer edges, and you're going to get a really centered look. It can be quite useful, especially if you slash a tyre and you're then looking on the inside. You can immediately work out from just where your logos are placed where you need to kind of start your search. Also, a way you can help yourselves again is whenever you're looking at a wheel, it's a really good habit to get into, always just put the disc, the brake side on the left-hand side. Because the one time you hold it the other way, I promise you'll install the tyre wrong, especially if you're thinking about cush core or any other kind of insert. It's an absolute nightmare. What we'd often do in racing is we'd put an insert in there, which we'd set up just normally tubeless, and we'd put a bit of tape going to the edge, and we'd actually just spot super glue. That would mean even if you punctured, you'd always finish the run. The team I was working for, Alex Fiol, actually won in Lords that year when he punctured in qualifying, but still got to the bottom of his run because he had the tyre glued to the rim. So now we're going to start installing the tyre. So I've got my branding at the top, the tyre is facing in the direction of travel, and I'm holding my wheel at the correct orientation. So I'm going to bring it up straight in there. What we're going to do is once our wheel is nicely centered in, we're actually going to install the non-drive side first, so the braking side first. This in case you've got any residual sealant hanging about in the tyre, it's not going to cause any problems. So real simple, whenever you're installing a tyre, you want to start opposite the valve, because then you can pull the bead deep into the well if you need to, and it will help you get it on with minimal fuss. Then we're just going to check, so that's exactly opposite my valve, so I'm just going to shimmy that round a bit. Look at that, Continental, probably evenly spaced from those two spokes there at the edge of the branding. So turning it round, we're going to then opposite the valve again, pull that down into the bead. You can kind of make yourself a little work stand out of your hips. Now you could at this point pop it straight on, which is completely fine, and then bead the tyre and take the valve out and inject the sealant through that way. But we're going to add something, we're going to go a little bit off menu when what we put in the sealant, and I'm hopefully going to introduce some stuff that's going to help clog up any large holes. But it goes both ways, and sadly though that stuff would have real difficulty fitting through the valve. So we're going to add our sealant like normal, and then we're going to add something a little special. So I've added some sealant. Now with all your sealants, it's really, really important to give them a good shake beforehand. You don't want to just leave all the kind of thicker bits for a later date and pretty much just get watered down goodness at the top. So give it a good shake before you do. And now we're going to talk about the little added bits you can do. So a really good one is actually just black pepper ground up. This is going to help clog bits, and it actually is an ingredient in some kind of major brands of tyre sealant. It's relatively cheap, it's organic, it's an organic matter, it's not going to kind of do damage to anything really. So that's very, very good, and that's what we're going to go for today. If you wanted to really push the boat out, you carefully borrow a cheese grater from the kitchen with the promise of bringing it back. And this one's a bit controversial. What you can do is you can grate packaging, that kind of polystyrene stuff, which is awesome for clogging up tyres. It does it better than pretty much anything else I've ever used. However, it's probably not the best environmentally. So if you're going to do that, maybe just use it for something like really important race, and be really careful to dispose of it properly afterwards. And you don't want it kind of getting out into the Mother Nature's playground. So we're just going to stick with the black pepper today. And very simply, we're just going to crack some pepper. More pepper, monsieur? So those kind of pepper particles are being suspended by the fluid we already have in there, and hopefully they will save our day without us even realising it. So now we're going to start opposite the valve and just get the tyre seated. Now, something people often struggle with is this can turn into a messy job. So what we're going to do is actually going to rotate it around and let it just slide to the bottom, and that gives us pretty much free rein here to go pop it on. Now, once that sealant is in there, sometimes people really struggle with the last bit, but once it's in there, you can have the tyre pretty much like that, even if it's not closed on this side, and you don't really get messy. If you've got a really difficult tyre, it can really help to put it over a bin, obviously making sure the disc isn't contacting anything, and you can put your full weight into it and purge it all through. So now it is time to try and get some air in our tyre. If this is being difficult, you can happily remove the valve core here, which is going to basically let a high volume of air flow quicker into the outer tyre and get it going. But I think we'll probably be okay. We're just going to give it an absolute beans with a track pump, which is basically the only upper body exercise that us cyclists get, is trying to fit tubeless tyres. Now, a bit you can do if you're really struggling, you've added the soapy water, it's running at God knows what PSI and it's still not going onto the bead, is if you go to the hinge of a door, so where it's opening up just at the kind of the frame side, you can put your tyre in it, and pulling the handle back towards you, the back of the door will clamp it between the frame, and then you can just pop it on. It's a bit of a bodge, and you certainly want the person whose house it is permission, but it does do a very good job. So now we've been running tubeless for a while. Life is good, punctures are a thing of the past. However, you want to check how much sealant is in there. Personally, I'm someone that I just pop it off the bead. It just doesn't seem like that much of an issue. But what a lot of people talk about in the comments, and it's actually a pretty good trick, is removing the valve and using a very small cable tie. You can use it as like a dipstick in there. Which seems like a pretty good idea to me. The amount of sealant you run does have an adverse effect on how well your bike will roll. Roadies have done loads of studies on this. Obviously, rolling resistance is somewhat of an obsession for them, where perhaps we don't care so much in mountain biking. So you don't want to go overzealous on sealant, but personally, how fast my bike rolls when the thought of being stuck by the side of the trail in the rain, well, weighing up one or the other, I probably go a bit more generous on the sealant, especially with tubeless systems. If you kind of sometimes hit turns a bit too hard or come into compressions quite firm, you can burp sealant out, and that means if that happens, you've still got enough in the rim to continue the ride. Now, if this was good and you thought, oh, Henry, I actually learned something today, well then you can always check out a thing I did a couple of weeks ago about silencing cable rattle. Hopefully that will also satisfy the nerdy impulses with this inside of you to keep your bike silent. If you also want to carry on that theme of tech, why not have a look at Blake Sampson's hardtail from the Mega Avalanche with Doddy. It's an awesome watch, and he talks a lot about the rigours and the demands of tyres and wheels and what they go through on a race like the Mega, especially when you're doing a hardtail. But yeah, thank you very much for staying with me. I hope I've been of some help. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, thank you very much for watching.